Well, hello and welcome to Swiss Gold Global Money Matters program for this evening. My name is Bill Rao, the founder and CEO of Swiss Gold Global. And tonight it's really going to be a very important presentation from my good friend, the US attorney, Carolita Oliveros. I think this subject is one of the most important subjects that we can actually get engaged in. I mean, in my own life, of course, I can go back to the 1970s when my father passed away suddenly, not expected, just happened one moment to the next. It throws the family into chaos. In fact, even my children's my children's mother, 18 months ago, suddenly passed away. Tragedy. Of course, it throws life into chaos. And if you're not correctly prepared for this subject, it's probably the most emotional time that you can deal with in your life, anyway, the loss of a loved one. But it can get very hard when you actually deal with authorities when it comes to transfer of wealth, if you're the executor of a will. And just to give you a bit of an idea how cold it was, my daughter, who is 17, of course, she was applying for kindergeld, which is, children's get paid some money here in Germany. They live in Germany. And of course, because they were paying it to the mother, it actually goes to the parents paying to the mother. Of course, the lady said to her quite coldly, actually, you can't pay a dead person, which is quite harsh. So why I'm saying this is this subject that Carolita Oliveros, an international attorney, I'm going to touch on her biography shortly because it's really quite amazing. This subject is so important. None of us think about where we're going to go, but there's two certainties in life: death and taxes. And if you're not prepared, if you don't buy assets properly, if you're not prepared for the transition onto the new world, and we're all going to go there one day, we're all going to go home, your family's going to pay the price. The wealth will be transferred away from you to someone else. Now, in some parts of the world, Carolita will touch on this today. We had a bit of a discussion before the call. Over certain thresholds, the state will take well over 50% of your wealth. Now, it may have taken generations to build wealth, generations. And a new generation, of course, not understanding these types of things, by the wrong decisions they've made, that wealth can slip through your fingers. So it's really important that you do understand, and I'm so grateful that Carolita is presenting this. But let me just touch on a bit of history. First of all, this is the first presentation for 2018, I think, if I remember correctly. We did one just before the new year, I think, wasn't it, Carolita? And then...
Right.
Yeah, so I'm so grateful for Carolita's been. She's a great friend. She's been serving our members in Swiss Gold Global now for multiple years. She does not get paid for it. She does this from her own will and spirit to give back to the people. What a beautiful servant attitude. But let me just give you a bit of an update on who Carolita is and what she's actually achieved in her life, because I think this is really important so you value the information that you have at your fingertips here. Carolita is an author, speaker, international business attorney focused on working with clients in international business, e-commerce, international manufacturing, distribution and marketing on products and services, technology, intellectual property, protection, real estate investments, social entrepreneurial endeavors. Ms Oliveros holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Florida, USA, a master's degree from the University of Texas at Austin, USA, and a Juris Doctor from the University of Arizona College of Law, USA. I'm not going to stop there, Carolita. Let me go on a bit here because I think it's important. During the past 25 years, Ms. Carolita Oliveros' activities and accomplishments include faculty instructor in the Maguire Entrepreneurship Program at the University of Arizona, the Entrepreneurship Program at Thunderbird, American Graduate School of International Management in Glendale, Arizona, adjunct instructor at Pima College, teaching courses on business law, managing on non-profit organization and finance, faculty member for the Best Brilliant Ideas Business Plan Contest 2010-2011, author of personal finance courses, which she co-authored, you'll know this name, for the Rich Dad Company, and founder of and author, developer of seminars, which is, of course, Robert Kiyosaki, workshops, educational materials, etc., and recession-proof financial strategies. So Carolita has a long, deep history in this industry, recession-proof investment strategies. She's also is the co-chair of Tucson of the Arizona District Export Council and appointed by the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, board member of Planet Coexist in Tucson, and the co-founder of Momentum for Women. She's the past chair of the Arizona World Trade Fair and the past chair of the Tucson Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce International Trade Committee, among many others too numerous to list. Most importantly, she's a faculty instructor here at Swiss Gold Global, which I'm truly grateful for, Carolita. So I'm really going to pass this over to you. We look forward to hearing this information from you tonight because it is so important. And I want to thank everyone from many parts of the world. We were going to do the call last night. I must confess, I made a mistake on the time. So we had to reschedule today. That was my error. So I hope that you all benefit from this. There's a recording on this. I also want to reach out to my friend Michael Perron. I know that he's on the call. Good to see you, Michael. I look forward to catching up with you in the US. So over to you, Carolita.
Thank you so much, Bill. I appreciate all those kind words, and I appreciate your sharing your insights with regard to the subject today, because as you know, I'm really pretty passionate about this. So shall we get started?
Absolutely, I can't wait.
You know, from the very beginning, gosh, Bill, I think it's been what, 4 or 5 years now? 4 years, at least 4, maybe 5. I've been talking to all of you about the fact that we need to think big. We get stuck inside our little box that we build for ourselves, by the way, and we don't seem to think that there's anything outside the box. At least that's our comfort zone, so that's where we stay. Well, then over the years, every year I've added a new component. We started out thinking big. Then I added think exponentially, because things are happening at an exponential rate now. I mean, if you look at technology, which we've looked at a lot over the last few years, it's changing exponentially, almost at the speed of light. And so then we talked about being bold, because you have to be, in this new environment, we have to be bold. But we also need to be strategic. We don't want to just fly off the handle and give some knee-jerk reaction to what we do or how we plan. So this year, I'm adding embrace change. The world is changing around us. The laws are changing. Everything, the technology, I mean, I don't think there's anything, if I look at my work environment and my personal environment today, and compare it to what it was even 6 months ago, there's been a lot of change. So we have to embrace that change. We just can't be resistant to it, because the more we resist, the more impact it seems to have on us in a less preferable way. So I want to talk about another embracing change idea today. But let's just look at, we looked at goals at the end of December. In my last webinar, we looked at goals and we looked at how big is your dream. So your project for the month was to go back and see how committed you are to manifesting your dream. You know, what goals and what strategies. And I'm not even so concerned about the goals as I am about the strategies that you use to manifest that dream. What do you have to give up if you want to be successful? You cannot hold on to the old, worn out, tired, outdated ideas and strategies if you want to be successful in today's environment. So what do you have to give up if you want to move forward? And then I asked you to please describe how you would apply these non-traditional strategies that I had gone through with you last month in terms of looking at goals in a little bit different way, because my perspective on goals is probably a little more non-traditional than many of the people who are out in the marketplace talking about teaching you how to make goals. But that's because I want you to have a bigger vision. If you're not careful, you will put down goals that only fit inside the little box that you have created for yourself. So my purpose in talking to you at the end of December about goals was to help you launch yourself for 2018 in a new way, in a bigger way, so that you can embrace the change that is all around us, that we will have to adapt to one way or the other. And if we choose to dig in our heels and not adapt, then the change will still have an impact on us, like it or not. And whether or not it's to your preference or something that you would prefer not to have is your choice. So that was your project for this month. We'll get to the project at the end that I want you to look at for the coming month. We talked about how to think and do exponentially, how to build exponential success. We've looked at the case studies on McDonald's and Walmart, and I refer back to those right now because one of the things that we'll talk about in today's webinar is intellectual property rights. And of course, intellectual property rights in the McDonald's and the Walmart case studies were a really big issue. That is, in fact, how both of those companies really launched themselves into astronomical success. We talked about, and we have talked about over the years that I've been doing these, how to value asset protection and how to monetize your assets. So the key question for last month was, how do I, or how should I, use exponential thinking, exponential technology, exponential action of all kinds in my plan to create wealth? In other words, will you do it? How will you do it? To what extent? A little bit or a lot? Well, only you know what the answer to the question was. So take a look at your notes, look at your iPad or look at the notes in your phone and look to see what you wrote down. How did you answer that question? And now I want to expand on that question, because the question was focused on in your plan to create wealth, but I want to go beyond that today. It's not just how do you create the wealth, but how do you keep it? How do you pass it on to the people that you love, to your family, to business partners, to whomever that may be, friends, charities? We looked at what my perspective was, and as I said, my perspective is a little bit more non-traditional than the average. So here's another question for you, because this happens every single January, and it happens to all of us, and that includes me as well. How many of you are still pursuing the goals that you sat down in writing for yourself, or at least you sat down and you thought about them, whether you committed them to writing or not? How many of you are still pursuing those goals? It's now the 1st of February. How many of you have forgotten about or given up on the goals that you set down for yourself for 2018 on January 1? Most people, I find, especially people who put down goals about losing weight or about being more conscientious about exercising, those two goals seem to get put by the wayside earlier on, maybe, than some of the other goals. So you really have to be committed. If you're going to put a goal down, you've got to be committed to seeing to it, and make it realistic, make it something that you can do. It may take a year. It actually may take a couple of years. I've had a couple of goals that took more than 1 year, but I was really dogged about it. I knew I was going to get there, and I was not going to let it go. The thing that we need to remember, and sometimes it's not comfortable, especially if we go back and hide in our box and say, I don't want to let this thing go, or I don't want to let that person go. There is a natural evolution to the whole process. And if something is really hindering your success, then you have a decision to make, because sometimes we simply have to let go of certain people or certain places or things or activities, whatever it is that is hindering your success, that is hindering you from reaching the success that you want for yourself. Pardon me. That doesn't mean we need to be mean, but people just seem to, or things or places or whatever it is, just seem to fall away from us as part of the evolutionary process. Because if you're really focused and you're really committed to a certain success level, and however that is that you define it, because success for all of us, for each of us, is defined differently. If you're really committed to that and other people don't buy into it, or they don't understand it, or it doesn't seem to fit their paradigm, then they will simply choose of their own volition to go and do things that do fit their paradigm. All of a sudden, I've got something here I don't want. There we go. Okay. Now, so the question for you is to write down who or what have you let go of, if anything, as yet. In order to make room for new ideas, new possibilities, new successes, you have to clean out the old. You just have to. Whether you want to or not, I think is a different question. And we all have to come to grips with that in our own time. But at the end of the day, it's just like a closet that's got too many clothes in it, or you've let the junk pile up in it. At the end of the day, if you want that to become a productive space in your life, you have got to let go of the clutter. So are you trying to overcome the obstacles with willpower? Remember, we talked about this. Willpower is the hard way to do it. Or are you boldly changing your environment? And that's why I'm talking to you today about embracing change. Because boldly changing your environment also includes getting your financial house in order, and that includes creating an estate plan. Probably for some of you, that may be a foreign concept altogether. Obviously, different countries view estate planning and the instruments that go along with setting up an estate plan, having a will, having certain powers of attorney, a health power of attorney and a financial power of attorney and so forth. Different countries have different names for those documents, but the concepts are generally the same. So really and truly what I want to give you today are the concepts. And then if you have a particular question about the country that you're in, I will help you get to the right person that you can talk to. Because generally speaking, estate planning, trust are a specialized area. For example, I have a law firm in the Cayman Islands that just does trust and estates that I deal with in the Caymans on certain things like that. Or, you know, in other countries that I've had to look at with regard to the same issues, particularly with regard to trust. So each country has its own set of laws that pertain to that. If I can just share my belief with you that your estate plan may be the most important financial decision you ever make, That is truly my belief. It's my belief as a lawyer. It's my belief as personally, from my own personal experience. It truly is the most important financial decision that you will make. Well, let's talk about what on earth is an estate. I mean, we hear that word, we use that word, but in a legal context, what does that really mean? The short version of the answer is an estate is your net worth in the eyes of the law. So what would be included in that? Just about anything and everything. Your bank accounts, doesn't matter what kind they are, checking accounts, savings accounts, retirement accounts, whatever they are. Your home, if you live in a house that you own, your car or more cars. I mean, some people have more than one car. Pension funds, whether you belong to a pension plan at your office or whether you have a private retirement account set up in the United States, we call those IRAs, individual retirement accounts. I know Australia has something very similar. Other countries have similar kinds of accounts set up. So that's all included. Any type of smaller asset, whatever that happens to be. I mean, it could be your stereo system in your house or, you know, your big screen TV. Now, intellectual property rights and licenses, that we've talked about a lot. If you write songs or if you have written a book or you are a poet and you write poetry, all of that is included in your intellectual property. And maybe you've even licensed some of it to be published, or you receive royalties off of a publication of something that you generated, that you created. Okay, all of that is part of your estate. Obviously, gold and silver and precious metals. Personal property, like your clothes, you know, all your personal items, that's all part of your estate. Even your social media accounts. And I cannot emphasize to you enough to keep some kind of a journal, wherever that may be, in your computer or a hard copy, wherever it is. Keep some kind of a journal of all your passwords. Because if you don't have that, social media accounts like Facebook, Twitter, whatever it happens to be, will not let your heirs into those accounts. And the downside to that is that many people keep really precious pictures of family and friends that they want to keep. They don't want to lose those pictures. And what happens if you don't have the password to get into that account so that you can retrieve all of those very important pictures is that they will be deleted. When the account is closed out by Facebook, they will be deleted. So you want to be sure that you have left a record of how to get into those accounts, especially with regard to bill paying, for example, because whoever is responsible in the event that you're no longer there to take care of it, whether it's because you've become disabled in some way or because you've passed on, if you're not able to take care of your bill payments, somebody has to get into those accounts and do the bill pay. Again, they're going to need a password. They're going to need a username and a password. So be careful to keep a current list of all of that. Real estate investments are also part of your estate. Many, many people have either inherited collections from their grandparents, like coin collections or stamp collections, or they got into it as a child and they've been collecting coins and photographs and stamps and a number of other things. I mean, these are just some typical examples, all their lives. All of that is an asset. It all has a lot of value. I don't know whether you've ever taken your coin collection to have it appraised anytime recently, but I think you'd be amazed to discover how much value it actually does have. The same thing with photographs and even baseballs or footballs that have been autographed by famous athletes, that kind of thing. They all have a lot of value. Artwork. Many people collect artwork. That's all part of your assets, your personal assets for your estate. China and crystal. You know, for weddings, it's very typical to have people give you your best china and your best crystal as wedding presents. Some people even collect. I have one client who has a huge collection. I mean, huge collection of china and crystal. In fact, she's even the president of the International Crystal Society and travels all over the world to various functions related to crystal, you know, whether they're bowls or vases or glasses or whatever it is. I mean, it's amazing to me how much value these kinds of assets have, but they all belong in your estate. So everything you owe, we never think about our debts as being part of our estate, but it's very true. Everything you owe, I mean, if it's bank loans or credit card debt, home mortgage, if you own your house and it's mortgaged, if you own rental property and you've got loans on your rental property, all of that debt is part of your estate. Any kind of personal loan, if you got a loan from a family member or a friend to start your business with, you know, if it was a personal loan and not a loan through that the business signed for, then it's part of your estate. That debt is, and it has to be paid off. So that gives you an idea of what's included in your estate. So what exactly is the estate plan? I'm talking about planning here, and that I think you need to do it, and that it needs to be included in your 2018 goals to get something set up, however small or however large. It doesn't make any difference, but you need to sit down and give it thought. You need to talk to your family about it, or whoever is important in your life, you know, your partner or your spouse or whoever it is, because there are so many examples, and I'm going to do a little brief case study with you on a classic example that's happened just in the last couple of years that really pinpoints the issue. So most of us typically think of estate planning as how to distribute your assets. When my father passed away, bless his heart, he didn't have very many assets at all. In fact, his car and the clothes on his back were generally what he had. Everything else was debt, major debt. And I spent years out of my own money paying off Daddy's debts because there were no, there were no funds in his quote estate to pay those debts, and the money had to come from somewhere. So I was working in Dallas, Texas at the time, and I wound up paying off my father's debts because could I have gotten away with not doing it? Yes, probably I could have. But I really didn't want to. I wanted my father's name to be remembered in a favorable way. I mean, he was one of the most important people in my life, and I didn't want his name to be tarnished by a lot of debt and, oh, well, he never repaid me kind of attitude. that wasn't anything that I wanted to have happen. So I paid it off. But you need to take into account that your estate, however large or small, will be responsible for paying off your debts as well as distributing your assets. So it's a lot bigger than just gifting your assets to your friends and family or charities or whoever it is that you want to give to. Another important thing, and a reason that you really do want to think about estate planning now, is that estate planning also includes healthcare decisions in advance. You know, you're probably very healthy right now. But what happens if you have either some kind of illness or you are in an accident of some kind and somebody needs to help you make those decisions because you cannot make the decisions for yourself? Well, those are called healthcare directives. And your estate planning includes documents that allow certain people, whoever you name, to be responsible for making those healthcare decisions for you in the event that you are not able, whether it's for a temporary period of time or permanently, that you're just not able to do it for yourself. So again, that's all part of estate planning that we usually don't think of. So let's talk about what an estate plan is at the very minimum. At the very minimum, it's your will, where you talk about distributing your assets and who they go to. And it's also what's called in the United States a durable power of attorney. And that durable power of attorney, a power of attorney is a document that you sign and you give someone, and that person is named, you give them the power to act on your behalf as if it were yourself. They can sign documents. They can do all kinds of things which are listed out in the power of attorney itself. So it'll either be a limited power of attorney, and I'll give you an example. Many times I've had, especially on real estate deals, I've had clients give me a limited power of attorney to review and sign documents for them at a closing, at a real estate closing, because they were either on a trip somewhere and couldn't get back for the closing, or they lived in a foreign country and they could not fly in for the closing to sign the documents personally. So they would give me a limited power of attorney so that I could go to the closing, make sure all of the documents were in order, make sure no changes had been made to them that we were not aware of, and then I could sign the documents as their power of attorney, which would be totally legal and acceptable, and they could get the documents filed so that we could close on the property. So that's a limited power of attorney. Now, a durable power of attorney is much broader, because a durable power of attorney encompasses everything. It encompasses not only signing on real estate, but any type of legal document that needs a signature, taking care of the business, for example. It could even be running your business for you if that became necessary. I mean, it covers everything, and it's very extensive. Sometime we'll talk about all the things that are in a durable power. That's really not the subject for today, but just so you know that there is a power of attorney, which is very, very broad in scope. So those are the two things at a minimum that you need to have as part of your estate plan. But let's talk a little bit more about other kinds of documents, because there are a lot of things that you can include in your estate plan. And it may be just a little insight here. It could be that you start out with just a will and a durable power of attorney. And then over a period of time, as your business grows or as you reach your success goals, your estate plan gets bigger and bigger. These are not documents that you have to have right this minute, not all of them. I would suggest to you that all of us need to have a will right this minute. And we need to have a healthcare directive right this minute. And some type of a power of attorney. Hopefully it would be more in the nature of a durable power of attorney, in other words, a very broad power of attorney. But those are the things that I think that we need to have right away. Let's look at some other ideas. The last will and testament is just another way of saying your will. Last will and testament is a term that has been handed down to us from Old English common law from centuries and centuries ago. And I still see it on most documents, most will documents. They're still called last will and testament, at least here in the US. But whatever it's called in the country where you're located, you need to have that, at least to the extent that you say, if there are certain things that you want to give to certain people, that you state those in your will or in what's called a codicil, C-O-D-I-C-I-L, codicil to your will. And that's an attachment. It's a change in some way. Usually it's a list of items that you want to give to certain people. And I would also suggest to you that if there are certain things in your family that have been handed down from one generation to another, and you want to give it to a certain person in your family, then take a piece of tape, put it on the bottom of the item. In addition to writing it on the list, put the tape on the bottom of the item and put their name on it, so that you can make sure that whoever you want to get that, I mean, if it's a beautiful vase or if it's a picture, either a family picture or something that was handed down to you from your grandparents, and you want to be sure that your children get it or that somebody else in your family gets it, just take care of those things. I know it sounds like, oh, there's nothing ever going to happen. Bill and I were talking about the fact I'm invincible. I'm invulnerable. Nothing is ever going to happen to me. And that's a great attitude to have because it makes you unstoppable in a lot of ways as you live your daily life. But at the end of the day, something could happen, totally unforeseen. And so you want to be prepared. You want to have your financial house in order. And that means having an estate plan of some kind. I want to talk to you a minute about a living will or a revocable living trust. Those are two of the most useful vehicles that we have in the US, and I am sure that they have a different name, but that you have them in your local country. A living will is an instrument that, as its name implies, is a will, but it gives you the right to make decisions and have certain things happen during your lifetime, not just after you have passed away. It will let you decide the sort of care you want if you're hospitalized and can't make your decisions for yourself. So, for example, if some people have a particular religious belief about being resuscitated, you know, whether or not if you're in the hospital and they put you on all of that equipment and keep you breathing, some people don't want that. And so they put in their living will a provision that says that they do not want to be resuscitated if certain things happen. If they get to the point where the machines are showing that they're brain dead, then they don't want extraordinary medical procedures performed in order to just keep their body alive, for example. So you can put those kinds of notations in your living will. A revocable living trust, and we'll talk more about trust in a few minutes at the end of the discussion. A revocable living trust in the US is a great asset to have for a family. I'm doing one right now, and I'll give you this just as an example because I think it's a classic example, not only of how a living trust works, but also of the kinds of problems that it will solve. When you put anything in your will, then if your assets total over a certain amount of money, you have to go and have the will probated. There's a certain type of a court that's called a probate court that hears matters pertaining just to wills of people who are deceased. The will name an administrator or an executor. That's a person who has the responsibility to make sure that all of the requests and so forth that are in the will are carried out, and to deal with the court to make sure that all the proper court documents are filed and so forth and so on, and to notify creditors, because that's the other thing. When I said that your bills have to be paid in the US, there's actually a provision in the Uniform Probate Act which says that you have to give creditors 4 months notice so that they can file a claim against the estate for payment of debts. So all of that has to be handled by your administrator or your executor. I don't want to make this too complicated, but that's what happens if you have a will. Now, if your estate is a small estate and it's under a certain amount, and that will vary from one country to another, and in the US it varies from one state to another, then there's a procedure called a summary procedure where you don't have to go through that whole probate thing, and it's a lot less costly. As you know, anytime that you have to go to court, there are expenses involved. So my preference, especially in estates where there are properties, for example, not only in the state where the family lives, but properties, investment properties in other places, whether they're international or domestic. This particular family has partnership interest in apartment complexes in California. Well, California probate procedure is really quite onerous. My apologies if there are any California attorneys on the call. But for those of us who don't live in California, it's costly and time consuming to have to probate something in California. One way that we can avoid that happening to the heirs, the children, the dad is deceased and the mom is still alive. One way that we can avoid having to probate those apartment complex partnerships in California, should anything happen to the mom, is by putting it in a revocable living trust. And that way, we avoid the probate. We avoid all of the cost, all of the time-consuming process. The properties remain in the trust. They're passed to the heirs in the trust as named in the trust instrument. So it has a huge benefit from that perspective. It also allows the mom, because these partnership interests generate annual income, it allows the mom to receive the annual income through the living trust, and she can still use that money to live on. She's not precluded from having access to that money because she is the trustee of the living trust. The trustee is somebody who handles the day-to-day activity of the trust. So she can write a check on the trust account, bank account, and she still has access to the funds. So it works out really well. We talked about the healthcare power of attorney. I think that's critical to have. And there is also another type of power of attorney, and that's a financial power of attorney. And that's where someone has the power of attorney to handle your financial affairs in the event that you are not capable of making those decisions. Now, here is a trust, and there are many kinds of trust. These are, just 3 comments about trust, but there are many, many types of trust. There are many types of vehicles to pass large estates, and I would not recommend to you that you set up a big asset protection trust, for example, unless your assets are in excess of at least $1 million. And that certainly is true of any kind of an international trust. The reason I say that is because of the expenses, the maintenance cost of the trust, particularly if it's a trust that's offshore from your local country. There are fees that have to be paid on an annual basis. The foreign trustee has to be paid a fee. Any type of, usually the foreign trustees have a menu of services. So if they have to perform certain activities for the trust, for example, if the trust contains a business entity, a foreign limited liability company of some kind, or even an incorporated entity, those entities have to be renewed every year, and there's a cost to renewing them. So the trust has to pay that. Just by putting your assets into a trust does not alleviate the payment of cost and maintenance fees and debts that go along with the assets in the trust. Those still have to be paid, and somebody has to administer all of that. So you want to be sure that the trust is large enough and has some type of income coming in so that there is money in the trust to handle those annual expenses. That's true of a domestic trust as well. So while I think a living trust is very useful, you don't have, because you are the trustee of that, and because you have access to all of the trust, assets, and can handle that just as though you've been doing it all along, I think that's a very useful kind of a vehicle for families in particular, so that they can pass on assets and have to go through probate. These other types of trust, I think, are on a much grander scale. They involve many more assets, much more in terms of net worth of the trust itself and the cost involved. So that may be something that you would want to think about and put on your list of things to do at some point in the future when you have amassed enough assets of a certain value that you would benefit from having an asset protection trust, for example, because I think that's an exceedingly useful type of trust to have. It will protect you against lawsuits and all kinds of invasions of people trying to get to your assets, but you really do need to have enough value in it. Well, you know, the big question is, why have an estate plan? I mean, why go to all this trouble? Just sounds like an awful lot of work, and what's the benefit? Let's start by looking at, in an effort to answer that question, let's start by looking at what happens if you don't at least have a will. In some places, and I say places, it could be a state in the United States, it could be a foreign country, wherever you are, wherever your local country is. Some laws, if there is no one in your family to pass on your assets to, even if you don't have a will, then the worst case, and I say worst case because I see people throwing this information around in a haphazard way and it's inaccurate. The government is not going to come in the minute you die and take your assets away. Usually, at least in every country that I've had to do any of this work in, there is a procedure. If there is not a will, then there is a procedure to find heirs, family members, in a certain order, which is listed out in the statute, that your assets will flow to if you don't have a will. But you at least need to have a will, even if it's a handwritten will and you sign it and you follow the procedure for, it's called a holographic will. If you follow the proper procedure for a holographic will, then holographic wills are just as valid as written wills that have been signed by witnesses and notarized. But you need to find out what the proper procedure in your country is to do that, because you want it to be valid and you don't want any problem with somebody challenging it. So let's talk about what happens if you don't have anything. If you remember Prince, very famous rock star in the United States, Prince died very unexpectedly from a drug overdose on April 21st, 2016. So he's been dead now not quite 2 years. And it has been, for the family, a very disruptive time, because Prince, with all of his money and all of his assets, apparently thought that he would never die. And even though he was taking opioids and other types of drugs, I guess he didn't think that they would ever kill him. And he died without a will or any kind of an estate plan. He had done nothing, which set in motion an absolute downpour of lawsuits and claims against his estate. He actually has one full sister and 5 half brothers and sisters. And of course, they all claim to be heirs under the state. And I think, seems to me that his properties were in Minnesota. So under the state law, his full sister, his one full sister, meaning that Prince and his sister shared the same mother and father. She went to the court and petitioned the court to make her the executor, number one, and to make these 6 people the only heirs of the estate. Well, after almost 2 years, the court has now finally ruled that his 6 brothers and sisters are the heirs. However, that has not stopped all of the claims from women claiming to be his wife to at least 10 or 20 people claiming to be his children, other people claiming to be his brothers and sisters. I mean, the claims have just gone on and on and on. It's amazing what happens, especially when you look at the size of the estate. I mean, some appeals are still pending from people who have filed all of these claims of being an heir that were rejected, because now the court has said that now they will go back, now that they have made a decision that the 6 brothers and sisters are the heirs of the estate. They will go back and now look at the rejected claims and see if there is any reason that they would want to rescind that decision and reconsider it. So more than 45 people have filed claims, as I said, to be Prince's wife or to be his children or to be his siblings or to be some other kind of a relative after his death. That's phenomenal. And the whole reason is because we've got a lot of greedy people out there. His estate is valued, and they don't really know at this point, because I believe that probably at the end of the day, it is going to be very much like a number of other rock stars who have passed away, and their estates have made more money after they became deceased than the amount of money that they made while the rock stars were alive. But right now they're thinking that the estate value is between 200 million and 350 million. And of course, when you've got that much money at stake, lots of people get greedy and lots of people decide, oh, well, I'm going to file a claim to be an heir. It's amazing to me as a lawyer what goes on with these kinds of. I'll stick to business. I like business really well. But the lawyers that handle these cases, the cases are just incredibly huge and go on for years and years. So that's what happens when you don't have a will and you don't have any kind of estate plan. And it doesn't matter whether your estate is worth $200 million or whether your estate is worth $100,000. If you don't have a will, somebody will make a claim against your estate out of the blue, out of nowhere, because they think they can get something. If that's not your intention, then take care of business. If you look at how much, and I don't know the final dollar amount because they actually haven't submitted all of that yet to the court, at least not that I could find in the Prince case. But if you look at the hundreds of thousands or even probably millions of dollars by the time, because every single one of those heirs had a lawyer, the estate had a lawyer, all of the people who have filed claims, some of them had lawyers. The court costs have been astronomical. And if you look at all of that, probably most of those costs and the court cases could have been avoided if Prince had had the forethought to have his estate properly planned with all of the proper documents in it. So back to the question of why have an estate plan? Because an estate plan, as we have seen, goes much further than just having a will. It includes your health care directives. It includes all of that. It's much bigger. There's more to it than just having a will. A will is just one piece of an estate plan. It helps you and your heirs pay substantially less in taxes, because there are certain ways that if you don't want to get, if you have a larger estate and you don't want to, especially in the United States and other countries as well, if you don't want to pay out 55% of the value of the estate to the US government or to some other government in taxes, then you can prepare your estate in such a way that it will help to lessen those taxes and the fees and the court costs. So that's a major concern and a major reason why you would want to think about all of this and plan appropriately. So a good estate plan, and these are just a few thoughts, this is not all of it, but just a few thoughts are that it would be designed to avoid probate, as we've talked about. It would be designed to save on estate taxes. I was telling Bill that up until 2016 in the US, the exempted amount on an estate, so that you didn't have to pay federal estate tax. Not all states in the US have a state estate tax. Some states do, some states don't. It depends on where you live. So you can save on estate tax. The exempted amount up until 2016 was $5,250,000 or something, over 5 million, a little over 5 million. That law did not get renewed. And so now it has dropped back down to $1 million. So now in the US, anything over a state of $1 million is subject to 55% tax, estate tax, which goes to IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. So if you want to avoid that, then you plan appropriately. If you want to protect your assets, if you need to move into a nursing home, or you need to appoint someone to act for you if you become disabled. I mean, these are all the kinds of things that are included in a good estate plan. The secret is you need to know what it is you want. So you need to sit down and give it a little bit of thought. You may want to even do some research, or you may want to talk to, certainly you will want to talk to your family. Quite frankly, and I don't want to sound morbid, but quite frankly, one of the decisions that I think is really important is whether you want to be buried in a casket or whether you want your body to be cremated. You need to share that with somebody in your family who's going to be responsible for taking care of it if ever the need arises. So, I mean, these are just ideas that I want to share with you because it's really important. If you want to preserve your wealth and pass it on to those you love, then you need to take certain steps in order to do that effectively. It will not just happen because you think that it's a desire that you have. You have to take some action. You have to set in motion and create the right kind of an estate plan for you and your family. And it's never too early to start thinking about it. Now is not too soon. For some of us, now is even a little late. So do yourself a favor. Take care of your wealth and take care of your estate plan. In 2018, while you're looking at these goals, and maybe re-looking at these goals because maybe you have dropped some of them already since the beginning of January, adopt a goal to protect you and your assets and your family with your estate plan. Make that a goal for 2018. You may not complete it in 2018, and that's just fine if you do not. But you have got to start thinking about it. You've got to start taking some kind of action. So embrace change. Embrace thinking big and thinking exponentially. And here's your project. Make a list. This is step number 1. Sit down and make a list of all your assets and all your debts. And if you live a long and healthy life, you will have many more assets at the end of it, and hopefully all of these debts will be paid off. However, today, you need to list what you've got. Please consider how you want your estate handled. Who's going to do that? You know, if you're the youngest person in your family, I mean, I looked at all of the wills and all of the estate planning that I did a number of years ago, and I had listed the aunt who raised me to take care of everything. Well, you know, she predeceased me, bless her heart. She lived to be 85 and passed away. So I really had to sit down and rethink a whole lot of things. That's why it's important for you to think about this now. So consider who will make those decisions for you when you can't make decisions for yourself, particularly on the healthcare directives. That's your project for the month of February, and we'll talk about it again at the end of the month to see how you're doing with it. You can do this in your, you know, if you're in a car and somebody else is driving, think about it for a minute. Jot some notes to yourself on your phone. Or if you're sitting on a bus or you're in an airplane. I mean, or the best possible is just to have a few minutes of quiet time for yourself in your house or in your office and think about it and give it some real thought. But, you know, you can do it in your spare moments. But please do begin. As always, it has just been my extreme pleasure to be with you on this webinar and to share my thoughts with you, to give you this information, and hopefully that you will feel it's as important as I feel that it is. If you have any questions, particularly if you need to know how to contact somebody in your local country, I may be able to help you there. I may not. I mean, there are some countries that I've never had to do this kind of work in, but I do have contacts here and there. So if I can share that information, I will certainly be happy to. And always you can email me at oliveros@flash.net, or you can go to my website, www.carolitaoliveros.com, and send me a message through the website. Bill, thank you so much for the opportunity to give this presentation, and I will look forward to next month.
Carolita, thank you so much. Fantastic information. I've taken quite a few notes myself, and I know I need to make some action and update some things myself. I mean, we could go on the question time, but we've gone over time a bit, so we won't. But I just wanted to make a few comments, which came to my mind, of course. You started at the beginning of the call how the world has changed so much, how it's transformed. Of course, we're living in a digital world. Just think of the wealth that's held in crypto wallets. Yeah. Imagine how many people I know around the world. There's hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of unclaimed funds sitting in banks from people who passed away and nothing has ever been claimed. But you can imagine the amount of wealth in the crypto space as well. So it really leads into, of course, is how are you going to share, how you leave information? If you have cash, if you have, you know, there's many people also passed on and may have had a secret place where they've hid their cash and never told anyone. Or maybe it's their crypto wallet, private key, they never exposed it to anyone. And of course, the unexpected happens, that wealth is lost. It's a real tragedy. It's a real tragedy. In fact, only a short time ago with my son and my daughter, we decided on a secret place where to keep my private keys to my crypto wallet, because it'd be irresponsible of me to transition onto the new world in one sense and have my children miss out on that wealth. So these are many things to think about, but your presentation today is just great information, and these subjects and questions could certainly continue, Carolita. So thank you so much for your time. We really enjoy that. We look forward to a next presentation of Money Matters with Carolita Oliveros. And in the next days, this presentation will be put up in your member account, the recording, so you'll be able to listen to it again. And don't be shy. I mean, Carolita has offered her services. You'd like to email her and be referred to some representative lawyer in some part of the world. She's only so gracious to be able to do that for you. So Carolita, from the heart and soul of all the members of Swiss Gold Global, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bill.